girls, Holly and Jessica. I felt I can't undo what's happened, but I can help explain it.
Ian Huntley was arrested and charged within a fortnight of the murders.
I've never murdered anyone, I've never raped anyone. What am I in jail for?
The parole board has to decide if Bronson needs to be kept locked up for the safety of the public. My biggest challenge was to persuade a jailed diamond thief to answer my letters. Martin Brunt, Sky News, at the Old Bailey.
Welcome back, you're watching Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. But first, our top stories. England fans have been celebrating after England have beaten Serbia in their opening match of the Euros. Ukraine's president says he would hold peace talks with Russia tomorrow if Moscow pulled its troops out of his country. A leading health think tank has warned both Labour and the Conservatives would leave the NHS worse off. You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with Stephen Bush, Associate Editor and columnist at The Financial Times, and Kate Andrews, Economics Editor at The Spectator. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. We're still waiting on most of the newspapers as they held on for the result from that England game in the Euros. Well, the front of the Mail features the England win, but the main story focuses on Labour's tax plans, saying Shadow Minister admits the manifesto isn't a sum total of spending plans and claims the party won't rule out council tax raid. The Financial Times leads with the Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves seeking to break down EU trade barriers and secure billions of pounds through an early international investment summit if a Labour government is elected. While the Metro leads with celebrity chef Gordon Ramsay, who's recovering from a cycling accident. Its headline, "I'm battered and bruised, but still alive." And, of course, we'll bring you the other newspapers as soon as they come into us. But a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by Stephen Bush, Associate Editor and columnist at The Financial Times, and Kate Andrews, Economics Editor at The Spectator. Welcome to both of you. This is probably the least amount of papers we've had ever starting a press preview, isn't it? But we'll start with The Guardian. And their photo there of Jude Bellingham, who scored the only goal in the Euros in that game tonight. We actually got the physical copy, so let's hold it up. This is a old-fashioned way of doing things.
He looks very happy, doesn't he?
Did you watch? Did you watch,
I did,
Stephen?
yes. I watched the first half at home and the second half in the cab to Sky, which may be why we've dropped a little bit physically in the second half. I become very superstitious when I'm watching either England or Arsenal, so I blame myself for the fact that
Lots of fans are like that.
I blame you too.
Yeah, well, it's... but, yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, it wasn't... the second half, was not as composed a performance as one might like, but I must admit I'm a sufficiently Gareth Southgate true believer, and I think it actually is just good game management. There'll be bigger challenges later on. Now that the calendar for footballers is so pointlessly long, part of the challenge is managing their fitness and form over the course of the whole tournament. So I think it was a promising start. Well, it does make me feel very weird to think Jude Bellingham, people who've played the football game, Football Manager, will have known about Jude Bellingham for a very long time. It makes me feel very strange just how much the England team now just is the Football Manager team from a couple of years ago. It makes me feel very old and slightly weird. So, it's Jude Bellingham, it's Declan Rice, and but no, I think, so not quite the performance we'd have hoped for, but, it's 3 points on the board, which is really all that matters in the groups.
You won.
Yeah, exactly.
You won. That's the basics. They've done the basics, done the job.
We'll take the wins. Where we
Nothing
can
to be
get
unhappy
them.
about, is there, Kate?
I'm originally from the States. I never feel more a part of this country than when there's a big tournament and I get to support England. And it's very fun to watch it anywhere, whether you're at home or in the Sky Studio getting ready. Everyone's glued to it. But I have to say, with an election on, everyone was already feeling quite tense. And a lot of people thought that this was going to bring some light relief, and winning feels great. It is not bringing light relief. I am now reminded of how tense and frankly miserable this process is, just getting through every match. But it's a great way to kick off Group C, and very good news for England.
And amidst all that election tension that Kate's describing, it has given us something to celebrate and cheer about and be joyous about, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, look, football is really the only thing now that gets the whole of the country watching together. It's the only ththing that kind of commands regular audiences of more than, 14 million. It's a thing which we, broadly speaking, can all, everyone in England unites around. I mean, I can already feel one of my very good Welsh friends will be angrily texting me going, mate, I was cheering on Serbia the whole 90 minutes. But actually, even that is a form of us coming together,
yes.
right? Then broadly speaking, that is part of the British national story. Is England fans slightly condescendingly go, oh, it's a shame that Scotland was doing badly, and most Scotland and Wales fans sit there going, I wish Serbia had had a late equaliser. But yeah, it's something that brings people together. It brings people a lot of joy. The thing I really like about any sporting tournament is that if you go deep into the tournament, when strangers start talking to each other on the tube, and it just, it's great. So, and also, there's now been enough of a space between this and club football that I'm excited to have football back on telly, so...
Let's look at the Mail front page. They're describing it as a nerve jangler. And even, when people are at the edge of their seat and clinging on, it is still a sort of communal activity that does bring people together, even if they're in a situation of angst together.
Oh, of course it does. And we can celebrate together and we can be miserable together if we have to be. Ideally, we won't be, but we also won't let the hope kill us. Stephen talks about how strangers start talking to each other. I think I've made a few people a little bit surprised when I've just gone up to them randomly at a pub because they're wearing some kind of Newcastle shirt, and I say I'm a Newcastle fan, and it's not so obvious when you first meet me. But it's
before the takeover. I should be clear. She's.
I was pretty upset about that actually, but you're not allowed to change your mind. Once you commit, you commit, and that's true for all of us, especially when we get to such incredible international tournaments. Once you commit, you're sticking by that team no matter what.
Okay. Let's leave the football and get back to the politics and the election campaign. Front page of the Financial Times, Rachel Reeves pledging to tear down EU trade barriers. In this, it is described as a reset of relations with Europe. Kate, take us into this.
The Shadow Chancellor has done an interview with the Financial Times going into Monday, and she's talking about an ambitious push to revisit the Brexit deals, Boris Johnson's deal and Rishi Sunak's renegotiated deal with the EU. She wants more flexibility when it comes to trade and alignment, and she also wants a better deal for the city. These are all very admirable pursuits, and it would be wonderful to have a more flexible trade deal with the EU. It's hurting business in the UK and across the European Union. But I think this is going to be a rude awakening for the Labour Party. The EU are not tough negotiators because they don't like the Conservative Party or because they have any particular opinion about a political party. They're tough negotiators because it is the utmost importance for them to protect the sanctity of their trade bloc. If you're in it, it's a free trade mecca. If you're outside of it, it's actually a very protectionist bloc. I think it will be very difficult to renegotiate the Windsor framework that Rishi Sunak already negotiated without putting immigration on the table. Because, of course, what the UK is experiencing with illegal immigration, Europe is experiencing at a much greater scale. And if the UK isn't going to talk about immigration, and I suspect it won't, because every major political party is ruling out higher net migration, I think it's going to be really hard to renegotiate a trade deal.
Does this suggest, Stephen, that Rachel Reeves is going perhaps a bit further than it was thought Labour would do in this direction?
I think she's being more explicit. I think everyone sort of knew that the Labour Party is a much more pro-European party instinctively than the Conservatives, and then they also know that they have to, particularly for our readers, where this is so important to British business, it's caused real harm to our economy. The Labour Party knows that this is somewhere where they can and should be showing a bit of a leg, as it were. But Kate's exactly right to say that, broadly speaking, the Labour Party is not moving that far in many respects. A welcome and very important and significant change of language, but while still ruling out membership of the customs union and the single market at a time when the whole of the EU, in some ways the UK is going to be the weird exception after this election. We seem to be moving to the left at the same time as almost everyone in Europe is moving to the right. If you're not open to new deals on migration, new deals on the customs union, new deals on the single market, you're left with this very bare-bones trade deal that the EU does not have much appetite, as we say in our piece, does not have much appetite to reopen.
It does feed into this pledge of growth that we've heard so often from Sir Keir Starmer, and the article detailing that amongst the other steps in the first 100 days of a Labour government would be an investment summit aiming to lure in foreign investors who been deterred by the UK's political instability as regards the article.
It's savvy that Labour have recognised that there isn't a lot of money to splash about right now. That's been a huge part of this election campaign, right? Acknowledgement that they're not going to be able to borrow, acknowledgement that they have to explain that everything's costed, what they pledged, they have to have the money for. If you want serious investment, especially into infrastructure and really expensive things that the UK would like to have, you're going to need private sector money. But it's one thing to say we're open for business, and it's another thing for your public policy to show that you're open for business. And I think there's a lot of question marks for the Labour Party, especially around employment law, about whether or not they're really going to be appealing to bigger business in particular.
Let's take a look at the Mail. We'll pop back to the Mail. Excuse me. And this is, well, we've heard from Sir Keir Starmer saying that, he doesn't want to tax working people, specifically he said working people, and that we pay too many taxes as it is. But it seems as if a little chink has been found in the armour of, there will be no tax rises with Wes Streeting.
Yeah, Wes Streeting interviewed on the Sunday programme, so they're saying he wouldn't rule out changes to council tax, and then saying, look, what we're saying in our manifesto is not the end of what we'd do. Hopefully, if we get growth, there'll be more spending, which, of course, is exactly what the Labour leadership and the Shadow Treasury team do not want to see Shadow Ministers saying, because it facilitates front pages like this one. Has Labour let the cat out of the bag on tax? Now, of course, the thing we all know about this election is neither party is being straight with us about their tax and spending plans. There is no way that you can make either the Conservative or the Labour plans add up without some form of tax rises.
Or spending cuts.
Or some form, but I mean, we've clearly reached the end politically of what spending cuts are politically deliverable, right? There's a reason why the government hasn't been able to cut spending despite having quite a large majority since 2019. There's a reason why that approach had kind of run out of road by 2017. But of course, this is a much more important question to the Labour Party, because unless something truly momentous happens in the next 3 weeks, it's the Labour Party which is going to have to fill this huge hole in both parties' spending. And this is, I think, going to be the big theme of the second half of the election campaign. People switched off from the idea that this contest is open, and it will just be, I think, wall to wall, particularly in the right-wing press, where is Labour going to get the money from? How do these policies add up? Because in addition to it being the smart thing for the Conservatives to pivot towards going, you know, have a strong opposition, don't vote reform and see the Conservatives wiped out, it puts all of the policy focus on what the agenda of a new Labour government is going to be.
Kate, isn't Wes Streeting just simply being honest? He refused 4 times to rule out increasing or revaluing council tax. He's being honest.
Well, I think
you know,
he's
and
being
when they
more
say they
honest
plan
than-
to do something, that's
Yeah.
dependent on the circumstances.
He's
isn't it?
getting closer to honesty. As Stephen points out, it's the conversation that the Labour Party and indeed the Tory Party don't really want to have leading up to the election. But Wes Streeting is certainly being more honest about the fact that something's got to give. The Institute for Fiscal Studies estimates that in the next Parliament there's a 20 to 25 billion pound hole in terms of funding the public finances, public services. How do you fill that? Stephen says if you don't want to opt for more tax cuts, if you think that's going to be politically difficult, you either hike taxes or you grow the economy. And all Labour want to talk about right now is growing the economy. Dare I say, sounds a little bit like Liz Truss. Real growth is phenomenal for filling in those budget holes because you actually do increase tax receipts. But hypothetical growth does not give you anything. And you can talk about it all you want, but you actually need the policies to deliver it. And so I think it'll be very interesting. Labour will talk about growth for a while, but if we start to get to the point where the numbers just aren't adding up, and of course markets are going to be very sensitive to what a Labour government is doing, especially at the beginning, tax rises could be on the table. And I think the cat was let out of the bag last week when the Labour manifesto was published. Yes, it ruled out very specific taxes, income tax, VAT, national insurance. It didn't talk about any other tax. And if it's not ruled out, that means it's still on the table.
Indeed. Kate and Stephen, thank you very much for the moment. We're going to take a break. Coming up, London has been named amongst the top 10 most expensive cities in the world. We'll take a look at that story inside the Metro next. Stay with us.
Now that's an elephant named Shirley shouting out for her mate Sandy, and then this. And that's an elephant named Echo calling for Ella.
Well, we call them these names. They have other names for each other, but they seem to have names, and that's really exciting. We've been watching them for so many years, and we've noticed that, you know, they'll give these particular calls, and sometimes one elephant answers, and sometimes a different elephant answers. And it's very clear that they're calling a specific individual. So we finally know now that that's how they're doing it. I mean, elephants now are the only animals we know that have arbitrary names for one another, and it means that they're able to create these names. You know, they're able to create new sounds. And it begs the question, how else are they using that in their communication? For instance, are they able to say where specifically they want to go? They have what we call let's go rumbles, where they'll point in the direction they want to go, and then get involved in a transition into a discussion about it. So we now wonder if they aren't saying precisely where they want to go.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. Alex Crawford joining us now from Ukraine.
Their personal possessions are all scattered around the place.
Our economics and data editor, Ed Conway, try and make sense of the big numbers for us.
Things can change incredibly quickly, and that's what they have done.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview. Still with me, Stephen Bush, Associate Editor and columnist at the Financial Times, and Kate Andrews, Economics Editor at The Spectator. Let's take a look at the front page of The Guardian and this story about there being a lot of pressure put on Sir Keir Starmer. This is regarding the two-child limit on child benefits, and that he should actually get rid of this limit on this policy. Kate.
So understandably, especially from the left of his party, Keir Starmer is getting a lot of pressure to address policies that were brought in under previous Conservative governments, particularly around austerity, and this was one of them. And it is estimated that the number of families that this is going to continue to hit is going to be an additional 670,000 by the end of the next Parliament. The tricky bit is that to scrap this benefit, or the cap on this benefit, will cost £3.4 billion. Now, that in the grand total of the budget, you could say, surely you can find that, but where do you find it? As The Guardian points out, that's similar to having to unfreeze fuel duty. It's similar to the kinds of money that go into the NHS every year. Where are you going to take it from? And to our last conversation before the break, these are exactly the kinds of questions that Labour does not want to address before the election.
Especially as they've included a promise in the manifesto to reduce child poverty.
Yes, and it's hard to see how that target on child poverty can be met solely through growth alone if you're leaving things like the two-child benefit policy intact. Yeah, so some people in the Labour Party will go, look, we're being slagged off in the Mail for purportedly planning to tax too much. We're being slagged off in The Guardian for not spending enough. That shows we're probably in about the right place electorally speaking. But this row over two-child benefit is going to run and run under the next Labour Party. Most Labour MPs got into politics because they care a great deal about child poverty. Indeed, many Labour candidates and new MPs were people who grew up in poverty under the last Labour government, have that very classic social mobility story that we see in the Parliamentary Labour Party an awful lot. They are not going to want to vote for the continuation of the two-child benefits limit. And I think this is going to be a big row, particularly the fact, as it pointed out, the fuel duty freeze, which most Labour MPs do not have a particular attachment to freezing fuel duty. I think this is going to be a big political subplot, because if you're the shadow Treasury team, or soon to be the Treasury team, you don't want to give away any of your flexibility on tax and spend. And you're maybe thinking, if you're going to unfreeze fuel duty, do you really want to spend it on something which ultimately touches fairly few voters, or do you want to do something more electorally salient with it?
And this story comes next to this one in the Metro. It's a continuation. Cost of living pushes London into the top 10 most expensive cities in the world to live in.
Yeah, I think a lot of Londoners will be confused as to why it wasn't already there, but there are a lot of other expensive cities, I suppose, to compete with. It's jumped up the list 9 places, still ranks below New York and cities like Hong Kong, which retained the top spot. But I think this is a particular reminder. The article talks about inflation and interest rates going up, but particularly housing. When we're talking about London and the Southeast, and we're talking about just ridiculous cost of living issues, they fundamentally come down to housing. Whether you're renting or you're buying, they affect each other. Housing costs are just completely ridiculous and unsustainable because we can't build in the UK. It's something that the Labour Party is saying it really wants to address. It's starting to put up policies as to how it would do that. In the same way, Labour MPs aren't so connected to fuel duty. They might have more flexibility about housing compared to the Tories that have to protect their voting bloc in a lot of those areas, but it's the #1 issue to address.
Not going to be a surprise to anyone reading this, is it?
No, whether you visit London or live in it, you know it's become a very, very expensive city. And exactly as Kate says, particularly an expensive city to live in because we don't build enough houses. We need to build more. We need to build more towers. This is, in terms of, things that would improve growth, this is the big thing that is lying on the table.
Huge.
And this is actually the big difference between whether or not the next Labour government is going to be a success or a failure is if it can unblock these barriers to building. Because if it can, then that does make all of the trade-offs we've been talking about and all of the things that have been argued about in this election campaign much less painful. And if it can't, well, I suspect then however big the majority is, this Labour government might be a one-term proposition if it can't get things like this fixed.
OK, just time to have a look at also a story in the Metro. And this is Gordon Ramsay, who's had a very, very, very nasty accident on his bike.
Oh, it looks horrendous. Wishing him very well for his recovery. It's a warning, really, about the dangers out on the road, and the bruise on him says absolutely everything, and the importance of safety and wearing a helmet, because the impression that Gordon Ramsay was giving is that he wouldn't be here today if he weren't wearing that helmet. A lot of cities are still not designed for cycling. I think New York is one of them. London, I have to say, I don't think is great in a lot of areas. You go to those cities that are designed for it, and it's so much more positive for the cyclist there, but seems like a very unlucky experience he's had, and thankfully he's going to be okay.
Yeah, no, I mean, he said he's still in pain, but he just really wanted to show his bruise and speak out to people to say you must wear a helmet, because had it not been for that, he perhaps wouldn't be here today.
Yeah, helmets save lives, and even when it's not the difference between living and dying, it can be the difference between having the life you had before and having life-changing injuries. But Kate's exactly right to say that this is partly, yes, cyclists should wear their helmets, but also cities do need to become more cycle and pedestrian friendly. The difference between New York and London is light and day, but then the difference between London and Amsterdam is light and day as well.
Yeah.
Right.
Thankfully, Gordon Ramsay is fine, battered and bruised, but still alive. Thank you very much for the moment, Stephen and Kate. Thanks for taking us through the papers. We're going to take a look at the weather for you now. Well, the next few days remain showery, but there'll be fewer showers later on in the day as low pressure drifts away into the North Sea and high pressure builds in the west. It'll be a rather chilly start to the day for southern parts of the country, but there'll be some good sunny spells once early mist and fog clear. North Wales and northern England will be cloudier with outbreaks of showery rain. Northwestern parts of Ireland and Scotland will be rather dull and breezy, but there'll be some good cloud breaks over central and southern Scotland. Showers will develop through the day. Some of these will become heavy and frequent, particularly in the north and northeast, where the odd rumble of thunder is likely. Temperatures will range from just 12 or 13 Celsius in the chilly north to 22 Celsius in the south. That's 72 Fahrenheit. It'll become drier from the west through the afternoon, but showers will persist in the north and east. Coming up next on Sky News at 11, England fans celebrate a 1-0 victory over Serbia in the team's opening match at Euro 2024.